I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Carole Crawford, who's the Director of Operations for the Saturn Partners. This is Carole's first time to be with us, so we're very excited to have them. Saturn Partners is also a sponsor for the Maritime Cybersecurity Summit. Carole started with Saturn Partners in 2001, started by writing cybersecurity policies and eventually moved into cybersecurity assessments, testing, risk management, along with monitoring and remediation. Later down the road, the company has targeted maritime as a vertical market to help the industry catch up on everything.
That's right.
On everything. For you to be spending some time talking about policies and regulations and all of this kind of things. Carole holds an MBA from the University of Chicago in manufacturing, management, and marketing, and a BS in business administration from the University of Central Florida. So please welcome Carole.
Well, good morning. Let me see if I've got this up high enough. Okay. Good morning and welcome. This isn't actually my first time to one of these conferences. I was with you folks out in Houston. I think it was last summer or last fall. Anyway, but I was very interested in the group because it does good work to help further everything that we need to have furthered in the industry. And as she said, and she's right, when I first took a look at the logistics industry in specifics, one way or the other, it is so massive. It's so hard to get your arms around it because it's basically what moves everything around the world. And we'll see in a minute how shipping has a lot to do with that. But as far as topics go, as far as verticals go, when we took a look at all the transportation sectors, and we're talking about everything from rail to freight forwarding, all kinds of things, we zeroed in on maritime and especially on this one. We're targeting maritime because they are specifically stuck in kind of a time warp in certain ways. And then on top of that, they have to work to improve their communications between the internet or the IT things and the OT things. And I'll make some remarks going way back. I had clients in the Caribbean who needed SCADA work done a million years ago. And they did back then, they would not even recognize the IT security engineering as a real engineering degree. So it was that bad back then. And I can't say communications has gotten that much better. I was studying on the plane coming down here. There's still a lot of gaps. So there's a lot of fairly dry stuff in here. I'm going to try not to make too boring, but it is important to get used to my little clicker here. Okay, so we have our threat landscape. We're looking at protecting maritime communications. Communications covers also a huge broad area, so I tried to narrow that down a little bit, but we've got the size of the threat landscape, and then you always have the regulatory bodies breathing down your neck. I'm sure you all know. And in my research, I found that this is one of the things that has slowed down allotment and expenditures of money into our great cause to make things more secure and sound. Communication systems in and out of port. And there's going to have to be a sea change here, and it does have to start at the top. So yeah, I did address some C-suite executives in my other vertical. And the biggest thing is that just like with you folks or anybody down in what we call in the trenches where they've got to handle crises, planning, management, risk management at that level, we're still getting a lot of deaf ears at the very top. So educating them is a very important thing. And we'll talk about incident response planning and how maybe the top people need to be present so they know what's actually going on. Well, there's absolutely no doubt on this one. We got a global trade backbone. This is really staggering when you look at the fact that carriage of freight and the maritime industry accounts for carriage of 90% of world trade. So you can see if the industry is behind on a lot of areas, it makes it even harder to catch up. It's always easy when you fix things and change things as you go along, instead of having everything forced on you. But the industry, as we know, has some catching up to do. One of the things that we're talking about here is that convergence of IT and OT. In other words, the industrial controls that are necessary for vessel operations, and that's super, super heavily relied on in critical technology. So everybody's in this bed together, even though they were able to, some of them were able to stand alone for many, many, many decades. Interconnected systems, of course, that's what we're talking about. Satellite communication is also under the industrial control systems. You have to excuse me turning around. I'm kind of used to looking that way. All right, let's take a snapshot of our threat landscape. And one of the things that's really important here is a lot of folks in the industry and in other industries, they haven't realized how many areas of this has touched. And it's basically because we've had to thread the internet and the digital technology through everything. So in our threat landscape here, targeted attacks, ransomware, cybercrime, supply chain vulnerabilities are there. And supply chain I'll mention a little bit throughout, but it is a massive topic in itself. And so that's a whole other session, but we'll just lightly touch on that. If we look at this staggering amount of loss that's been happening here as the threat landscape has really exploded since COVID and has really picked up momentum since we recovered from a lot of that. And so now the bad guys are getting faster, sneakier, better at being where they shouldn't. And so vigilance is so important here on so many levels. $1 trillion in losses in ransomware and cybercrime. So here's something that I found out, and this is more on the industrial control side, but I found out that in a recent development, it's not really going to be ransomware. That will be the biggest topic coming up. We also have the fact that ransomware is still cited as the number one threat when it comes to the internet side of things, connectivity. But we're also finding out that because of old legacy systems on the industrial control side, and that, that covers a couple of different industries besides yourself, that now what they're doing, instead of the ransomware, they're coming in from behind, underneath, and trying to sneak in these old legacy systems that either have been outdated, properly patched, or they're very hard to patch. And when you have staff shortages and budget constraints, sometimes these systems, just because they've run reliably in all these decades, doesn't mean they're safe in this new environment. So it's really a backdoor thing now that's fairly new. You want to keep your eyes open for that one. I wrote an article. The packets that you have, there's just some sample pieces in there, but on my website, there's a lot of instructional articles on some of these things I'm not going to have time to really dig into. Specific communication problems here. Vulnerabilities, not problems, challenges. I don't know. Should I push that up? Doesn't want to come out. There we go. There we go. Hopefully you can still hear me. Now we have satellite communications, and that's vulnerable to what we call jamming and spoofing attacks. Any of you in the IT side of things, you know what that is. Satellite communications, right up there in the word list. Then we have AIS and GPS, GNSS, lack of authentication, encryption, and these are just basic vulnerabilities here. Shipboard data servers are also susceptible to hacking in landscape. And the access thing is part of the access control, part of any good security policy. We'll be talking about that too. Access. Who gets it? Who doesn't? Why isn't it being better safeguarded? In a better way, sorry. Vessels and ports. There's a growing use there of all these things, of course. And so it's a playground ripe for attack. I'm trying to remember where I got that one from, but flash drives, the most simple level any of you would know. These are the kind of things here at the bottom of the slide that we see commonly and in the early days of trying to breach. Okay. The communication system compromise is pretty major. It has to do with a lot of things. So you have an operational failure, which can disrupt, your shipping operations, delays, supply chain. There's supply chain, safety hazards, collisions, groundings, other things like that. And security breaches, which involve, TSIs, other things like that. Another thing I'll lightly touch on as we go through here, when you see the safety hazards part up there, what that is also is that it's environmental. So there's damage that happens with the accidents, there's damage that happens at the port, and there's things that can endanger marine life. That's a long chain. So anyway, I'm going to take a look at target systems. Stay on this slide for a minute because there are a lot of them. And what we found is there's a handful, I think there's like 5 or 6 here of targeted systems. So these are potentially vulnerable systems with data on board ships to assist companies to, assessing their risk exposure. Equipment and technologies may include the following. Communication systems, we already talked about that. Well, under that, we're dealing with integrated communication systems, satellite, we already talked about, but voice over IP, wireless LANs, public address, and general alarm systems. Sometimes those last two, they get like, what? I don't think we've ever dealt with anything like that or thought about it that way. But just remember in the casino business, it was an aquarium thermometers that cost MGM, I don't know, about $500 million. So it's not your kid in the garage anymore. These things are usually nation or state sponsored, also known as the bad guys for the good guys. So the next section is bridge systems. Under this category of vulnerabilities we're dealing with, now everybody probably knows we have a semi-crisis in our country. We have a lot of great bridges, but we also have bridges that need repairs, updates, and things like that. So the integrated navigation system, as well as the positioning system, the GPS, and the electronic chart display information system. These are all pretty much, high-level things that we have to keep an eye on here. Under this too, what's really big, and I'm seeing more of, is the dynamic positioning DP systems. Now, these are systems that interface with the electronic navigation systems and propulsion and maneuvering. And there's a lot of information out right now. I'm looking into possibly doing a little booklet on this one. It's a biggie. And then, of course, automatic identification systems fall under this global maritime distress and safety systems. And you got all your whole alphabet soup to go with this. And then radar equipment, voyage data recorders, other monitoring and data collection systems. So even under these major categories, there's like 5 subcategories where there's vulnerabilities when it comes to challenges for our industry. And by the way, when I was talking to Christy about topic and narrowing it in, communications is such a wide area. And I said, well, I'm going to just going to aim more at the cargo ships, cargo container ship, cargo issues, ours, regulatory issues around moving all of that stuff back and forth. It comprises 90% of what we do on the planet to move goods. Propulsion, propulsion machinery management and power control systems, also a big set of vulnerabilities here. We have the engine governor, power management, integrated control, alarm systems, and emergency response system, which we'll talk about a little bit more when we get into incident response planning. The next area that is a biggie is access control systems, which is we're focusing on unauthorized access, which is still so loose. I looked at compilations of tons of data from profiles of cargo ship owners and port authorities and everything about where they are in a lot of this. And it's scary because it's like you have someone on the end and we're totally prepared. We have a lot of wishy-washy in the middle with the numbers as far as preparedness overall. And then we have some that basically they're saying very boldly, I think 20%, it wasn't a high priority on their list and put them on the safety. And they basically were concerned about modernizing. But anytime you modernize, you bring anything into a build system, everything has to be tested. And they don't quite know that, let alone know how to do that. And that's not their job. I mean, that's like our job. So access control, big deal. Covers a navigational watch alarm system, shipboard security alarm, also your surveillance, here your closed circuit TV, and your bridge electronic and personnel on board systems. The next one is cargo management, and these are systems of all kinds depending on where you're working. But the vessel cargo management systems, cargo control room, and its equipment, level indication systems, valve remote control systems, ballast water systems, water ingress alarm. So that alone is under just cargo management. Then we have passenger and visitor searching and management systems, another key vulnerability. This is number 5. By the way, I can send you this piece. It's on the slides. Property management, PMS, electronic health records, financial related systems, ship and passenger seafarer boarding access systems, infrastructure support like DNS, user authentication and authorization systems. The next big category is passenger facing networks. So your passengers, you've got all kinds of issues with passengers. Some things don't apply to cargo ships, but you still have people coming on and off that may not necessarily need to be in certain areas. So we've got passenger Wi-Fi or LAN, internet access, guest entertainment systems they bring on board, bring your own device, BYOD, real dangerous thing we're dealing with now. It's just another expansion of the attack surface, no matter what industry. And devices are not used to access protected information. They can only be used for the individual's personal non-covered use. Once again, this goes back to policy, which is weak, as we've found. Core infrastructure, security gateways, routers, switches, VPNs, virtual LANs, IDS, and security event logging systems. That's a really important one. In the core infrastructure, that's pretty much where we're at. Under this last one, administrative and crew welfare, you've got the administrative systems, the crew Wi-Fi, LAN internet access, where onboard personnel can connect their own devices. Once again, the BYOD thing, and personal devices coming on board and getting access possibly. There, I can get back to the slides if you're still awake with me here. Oh boy, the regulatory part. It's boring. I was just getting that great. Yes, in case you want more to give you up at night. This is can get kind of dry, but we are looking at the regulatory landscape. There's a few slides here in areas, but we kind of picked the USCG area, Coast Guard, the final rule 2.0. There's a lot of information in there, but the compliance is rushing up. I can't believe it's in July 16th in 2025. You will be compliant with this final rule. And we do have some things here. Yeah, there we go. Oh, yeah. And then, of course, I mentioned that I went ahead last night and dug into this thing. But when I was looking at this, it applies owners and operators of vessels, facilities required to have security plans. And this always makes us nervous because security plan, I mean, what is that? Your police department, border force. I mean, you got to narrow that down. Anyway, but I did look under the CFR 33 parts 1 to 3, 4, 5. I was surprised it was pretty complete, but if you read over that separately as a document, it really focuses on the team building for incident prevention, intrusion response, and recoveries. Okay. All right, here are the key requirements of the final rule. And this is really important because this also talks about the designated security officer and development of the cybersecurity plan. Now, when I started in this business, basically it was the network because all of those OT things stood alone, isolated, therefore safe. And then came interconnectivity, and this is what's caused the uproar here. And of course, we're going to have to work together. But this is really important that the development security plan designates cybersecurity officer. That's really important. We'll go into that in depth a little bit. The intrusion with the incident response planning and operate according to plan, which means it doesn't sit in the dust. It needs to be exercised regularly, just like you and your dog. The biggest thing we found looking into this is that a lot of our poll numbers of people across the industry, responsibility positions, we're finding out there's either no policy, no coherent incident response plan. Things are piecemeal and kind of slapped together. And I think part of this is not budgetary. It's just lack of knowledge. And let's face it, when you're forcing change in a very, very traditional industry, you're going to get pushback. One thing that is, I'm just going off script here, one thing that's a real danger with any of the operational technologies, if you're working, for example, in the SCADA environment, which has been an industry standard for industrial controls, and not just in your industry, but a lot of others, for 30, 40 years. And we have two problems here. One, it's aging out, and yes, they're working on replacements for it. It's a terrific system. It's worked forever, but a lot of the people who knew how to configure and secure and shore up any remaining status systems, a lot of them are retired. So one of the things we found delving is that there's a lack of talent or knowledge within the people coming in to take care of, maintain, support, and start to replace these old systems. So once again, we have a staff and an education issue here on this one. And there's help for that. It's just, that's the way it is right now. This thing is so tiny. I got little hands too. Okay. All right. All right, communication requirements. Here we are. This is our communications piece of this one right here. Effective communication. The officers that are named, anybody in charge of compliance, and anybody in compliance better be on the response team. We have to have that communication. We're still having too much siloing. We still have too much where one department, one hand doesn't know what the other's doing. Continuous contact. That's part of making sure that you stay in touch, keep all of your preparations in place and up to date. Information sharing with documents. The whole thing is to develop a security program. Now it's a cybersecurity and an OT program, whereas before we were looking at the network for security, and then there came the cloud and social media and applications and smartphones and other things that have made convenience possible everywhere, but has made a convenience for all the bad guys to get in. But we're stuck with the good with the bad there, fortunately. Reporting incidents. This is important. We have I have a series of notes here on this. This is just kind of in a chunk. The slides are just a kind of a guideline. And I don't think those are in your folders, but if anybody wants copying the slideshow, just email me. My cards are on the table and in the folders. So under the incident reporting, we're dealing with the reportable incidents, contacting the National Response Center at a much higher level, and follow a cybersecurity plan if you have it. But this is part of what's being pushed by the final rule. Reporting had better be stellar, because the TSIs to the National Response Center, all these things have to be done to specify reporting cyber incidents, not all cyber incidents. So once again, you have a gray area in that one here. Okay, I'm going to go off script a little bit here. I was talking about incident response planning. Now, when I started in this business, you had 4 sections here, and internet incident response planning did not stand alone. It was actually, to us, the second step in a 4-step process. The first step was a business impact analysis, or what we might call a gap analysis, to take a look at what's going on with your environment there. Following that, you start to construct and educate, assemble your incident response team. This is the core of all this. This is where we relinquish control, temporarily anyway, if we're helping with this, to the whoever's going to manage, and who's ever going to be chosen at the top to manage this. And basically, you have your top security officer or your top team officer here. And the titles can be anything. It has to be someone at an upper management level that has the authority to assemble the team and to get people moving. Now, there are certain people that we believe need to be on this committee, or the planning committee, and part of the board, is everybody has to have a role. But you can't assign the role until you figure out who's going to be on the team. So we always recommend, depending on the size of the organization, it should be, you'll have someone from HR further up. Someone, of course, you're going to have your cyber team. Anyone in middle or upper management and IT should be on this team. And depending on the size of your organization, be selective about that. But you have to make sure that we have at least one person from what we call the C-suite. I told you about the deaf ears and upper management. The only way you're going to convince your upper management of the dollars you need when budgets are tight is that they need to be attending these testing exercises. They need to be part of the role assignment and who's going to do what. And on this one, I think is interesting because we've seen this happen so many times. One thing a lot of people, when they're building their incident response team, they pay no attention to, they don't have someone designated to talk to the press. So the thing is when these incidents come in, it's not a matter of getting hit. You're getting hit. It's who's going to get in and to what extent. You can catch this with a lot of help. Is that you can't have anyone who's cannon to screw up a reputation by talking to the press when they're not authorized, because as we know, the press is everywhere. It's not even in person. So you don't want somebody that's going to run out and say what happened on something that's not authorized. It's really important. We find that in person designation in the single line. So we have reporting guidelines here, but here are the most basic tips. And I don't want your eyes glazing over. Okay, we're doing okay. And this is just incident response planning is so important, and you're going to see it. There's other companies talking about this, so it's fairly easy to get started. The main thing, and I have a white paper on this on my site of some sort, but your frameworks first. What are you following? The final rule, or in other areas, it's NIST 800, whatever you want to use to adapt. What is the appropriate framework for you to follow? Like I said, the USCG final rule. Second, under this, you got to create security policies for incident response. And a copy should be in your master manual, and a copy for the incident response plan master that goes with the living, breathing plan. Next, you create an incident response strategy, meaning goals, speed, prioritize. We've worked with banks as well, and they have a zero downtime thing on getting things up and running. And when I told you, it used to be a 4-thing process. You had your gap analysis, and then you had your incident response plan. And then you have to look at your disaster response part of this, or disaster recovery. Once you have defined, goals, speed, where's an area where you cannot afford zero downtime? Zero downtime for a bank is core systems. Banks rely on, their reputation for security and safety. So in your particular area, you've got to prioritize what can we not have down? What is more lukewarm to cold, as we call it? You got something really hot that cannot be allowed to sit, and it has to be dealt with immediately. You're going to be ranking those in this plan in order of severity. So it's a blueprint, and everybody knows what to do. You have to define incident communication streams. Putting this together, you're organizing contact info, team role, mode of communication, such as phone or Slack. It's amazing what I've seen as far as primitive ways I've seen certain areas when we go out to see this. It's like you have a fire drill he was talking about earlier, and people just sit there and look at each other because they're not sure. And it's the response team. You can't have that. So everybody knows their places. That's really super important there. All right. Incident response. There we go. The establishment of the incident response documenting system, which means all the IR activities are organized for best results. And then who keeps the plan and who has access to the plan. Here's another reason that you need to keep it current and at your fingertips is in case of future lawsuits. Because God knows it's going to, every time I look at the maritime news, or like Fox sent me something where, it's like these people crashing into the Brooklyn Bridge. I've never seen so many. It's like you go out on the sea, and I'm waiting the next day who's going to crash into somebody else. It seems like a crazy time, more than usual. Incident response training. We think the staff needs to be trained on roles and response tests. I think the plan should be tested every 6 months. It's a tabletop exercise. A lot of the small organizations can sometimes get by with longer, but your larger organizations, all people need to be present. You need to do the tabletop exercise. And the biggest thing, because there's other areas here like access control, with incident response in mind and reach potential attacks. Will access change during an attack? Could be. Make sure the IR team has everything they need. Then we have identification, use indicators of compromise to alert when cyber incidents are in progress, and reference the threat intelligence feeds. For insight, make sure ID threat is laid out accurately. And then we're talking about containment. Determine how to isolate it. You can isolate it, but you have to prevent further damage, anything that you can do. One of the things that we've been doing is for helping learn, perform a forensic analysis on contained attack to get a clear picture. Eradicate, you should have your steps outlined, how to eradicate threats quickly and make sure all traces of the attack are removed, mitigate the vulnerability that caused the attack. Lastly, recovery. Like I told you, it used to be an altogether process. Gap analysis, incident response plan, disaster recovery plan, and how do we get back up on our feet? Business continuity planning. Vulnerability in legacy systems. What did I say? Now, a lot of ransomware people are going around the back to try to find what's weak in your OT structure. And human factors. This is really important. It's in that folder that I passed out. And there's a few left up right here, whatever. And there's a short article that I wrote on the human factor in maritime security. It's a huge thing. It's not just lack of training. It's the fact that in my business, it's still 60% of the time, everything we have that goes wrong can be traced back to human error. So just like when IDS systems came out years and years ago, I had clients who said, "Oh, no, I don't need any testing. I don't need any help with this." If you folks are not cybersecurity experts in your IT field, or your IT departments and OT departments are made on engineers and all kinds of things, but basically with crew members not getting training, that's one part of it. The phishing attack is really real, and we do social engineering inside out, on it from the inside out and the other way. And so, what part of the security awareness training or the crew human factor is the phishing attacks they're still working because of lack of security awareness training to spot them. They're the most common attack vector in the maritime sector. Then you have inadequate security protocols like using default passwords, shared credentials. And some of this stuff, it's really upsetting to me as to how far back this goes. For years and years, we've been telling people this, and a lot of the stuff can be traced back. A lot of the problems, you've got major impact on the breaches. So when communications get compromised, you got disrupted navigation, GPS spoofing, and then you've got regulatory and compliance gaps. The IMO guidelines are pretty clear. International ship and port facility codes exist, but compliance is inconsistent. A lot of organizations lack comprehensive security policies tailored to maritime communications. Years and years ago, I helped out some hospitals, small, medium ones in the Midwest, HIPAA audits and things like that. And one of the things that I found out is that they really, in the early days when I would go to a hospital, their idea of a security plan was, what do we do to protect our board system in a national catastrophe? There wasn't any IT, even though they had already had an IT department on every floor of every hospital 15, 20 years ago. They didn't communicate, and they were all fighting each other. I'm not dealing with hospitals anymore. It's a pain. So, all right, strategies to protect. You all have heard about the zero trust security model. This is identity-based access controls and, of course, multi-factor authentication, which is popped up everywhere now because of the surge in crime. Single sign-on is good to secure communications. When you're dealing with air gaps or legacy systems, you have a reliance on public networks, whatever it is. Monitor and audit access to trusted sources, only interacting with OT and information technology. Now, when we say regularly monitor and audit access, sorry, it's early. Blundering here. The trusted sources, it's very, very critical that you're choosy about who is going to have access to what areas. A lot what we found with our polling and everything is that There's still too many people wandering in and out that really don't need to be there. Need to know basis, as we used to call it. Strategies, of course, enhance network security, firewalls, IDS, secure communication protocols, and to protect data that's in transit or at rest and storage. Encryption is critical to safeguard sensitive communications like ship-to-shore reporting. Use anomaly detecting tools. GX1 has Stellar. There's a lot of it. This is to help detect unusual activity in real time. We had already talked about securing radio communications, satellite. That's very important. Another thing that we are strongly suggesting is 24/7 monitoring. Because people don't have the staffing a lot of times to even stay current with what's going on in the IT department, building a security operations center is definitely an option. Staffing in 24/7 budgets. So there's different options with that. It's your virtual CISO, 24/7 monitoring, 24/7 remediation. The idea is that the bad guys usually attack at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, not at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. And you've got that human factor trying to staff an SMC on site 24/7. It usually results in burnout, a lot of budgetary money wasted when you could do it from a virtual standpoint. So, we talk to people about that. Okay. Incident response. Okay. Contingency plans. That's your business continuity. Mitigate cyber risks, offline backups, critical system, avoid reliance on satellite communications during attacks. Resilient systems, of course, they minimize downtime. And there's just so many things that I saw in the way of notable incidents for protection. Let's see. Yeah. And so before we go into these guidelines here, you may have heard of some of these things. Some of them go back a ways, some of them are pretty recent, but they're all scary. We had incidences that highlighted real problems with these entities. They lost a lot. The port of Nagoya in July 2023, a ransomware attack disrupted communication systems, stopping the import and export operation. The port restored systems, used backup within days, underscoring the importance of preparedness. Incident response planning. Italics me. DP World Australia, November of 2023, unauthorized network access led to the closure of multiple ports, highlighting vulnerabilities in interconnected communication systems. And then we had the Port of Houston in 2021, successfully defended against a suspected nation-state attack due to mature zero trust controls, saving an estimated $1.14 million in breach costs. So some are prepared, some are moderately prepared, and some are in deep dip if anything happens. And we don't want to be shutting the barn door out to the cows, to use my former grandfather's analogy. So let's see, there we are here. All right. Framework and guidelines. You got your identification. You've got your protect, detect, and cover, recover, respond. So this is something that NIST put out in 2014. It's been updated. Now the most recent version, I think, is 2023. It's this wheel, and it's to make it more simple as to the larger areas that they want the compliance for. You've got your NIST, you've got your IMO guidelines, and Maritime Cybersecurity System Annex Guide. These are all really good sources. All right. Okay. Basically, under this framework, IMO put the guidelines out to safeguard shipping from current and emerging, I just read this, cyber threats and vulnerability. It also contains functional elements to support cyber risk management. We're going to talk in a minute as I head toward wrapping up here about risk assessments, because risk assessments can be confusing with vulnerability assessments. And so clarity, it's still, people don't quite understand the difference here. So the confusion on this one can be tough. So now we're going to talk a little bit about risk assessments. Risk assessments in maritime, especially for cargo ships, which is kind of what I'm focusing on, there's a systematic process of probable hazards. You look at the risks, implement measures to mitigate them. This is a really crucial process for enhancing safety and efficiency in ship operations, ensuring the well-being of crew, cargo, and marine environment. This is all ranked by severity of risks, just like a report. What's the hottest thing we have to take care of now? One can wait 8 weeks, one can wait 6 months. It's all part of your planning as to why you're testing and find out where you have hazards. The key steps, continuous monitoring and review. I'm coming up in the end, so I'll make it fast. Hazard identification is really one of the first keys in a risk assessment. Potential hazards with the ship's operations, slips, trips, falls, machinery, and chemical hazards, fire hazard. Risk estimation is the second one. This is evaluating the likelihood of the hazard happening and the severity, ranking severity and its potential consequences. Number 3 is risk control. Implementing the measures to reduce the identified risk. Remember, you got to learn from whatever you practice and find when you do a drill. What do they say about, well, I know this personally. How do you know you have the best insurance company? When you have to file a claim during a disaster. So a cheap premium for any insurance doesn't mean much, when your roof caves in or somebody rams your ship. Well, you got the point. It's implementation of safety measures. This is training, documentation, and communication. So the security awareness for frontline, that's just the basic stuff. But when we get down to the nitty-gritty on the ship, operational-wise, you know what you need to do to make sure you've got implementation of safety measures in place. This one's a favorite of ours. We recommend continuing monitoring review so that we can catch these scumbags on Christmas Eve instead of having somebody having to work through a ship to do it and fall asleep. So risk assessment is just really super important. So we'll just finish with the slides here real quick. But this slippery thing keeps sliding. There we go. Asset management and risk management. This is pretty much what I was talking about. You know what your blueprint looks like for your particular setup. I know we have port authorities in the country that are itty bitty, and then the ones that are big monsters like Fort San Diego, Long Beach, and New York. So some of your smaller entities and cargo companies, have no excuse not to do this. It's much more on a grand scale when you got a big giant trying to do all this from scratch. So anyway, just making sure I'm at the end here. There we are. Okay. Addressing supply chain risk. Access control, we talked about data security. These are all the steps laid out, and I do have all of this I can send you as far as the protect, defend, identify, and the role of that wheel. Protection light. Applying it, detect. This is all really part of your plan. It's just that NIST 800 and NIST, and actually the Coast Guard too. They just put more emphasis around certain things, but it's all pretty much in here. Respond. See in the middle, it says coordination updates, and it also says coordination to make sure you've got everything planned out and all your roles are assigned. When it comes to the cost on these things, and we hear about budget all the time, and these things are all and should be scalable depending on the size of your operation. So a lot of people, and we found this in the banking industry a long time, they thought they were too small to be intact and nobody would bother with them. Now, if you got 3 machines, now you got issues. I don't care what industry you're in. Just like I said, disaster recovery planning, system restoration, stakeholder involvement, watch your reputation, didn't talk trust, make sure you know what must be taken care of first, and don't let it slide and go unrehearsed. Very, very critical here. Yeah, I said board level involved. Betcha. You always have to have the guys and girls at the top. They make the budgets. They're the ones who the kibosh of things that we know to do if they don't understand I just got done talking to a group of bankers about how incident response, well, I should say cybersecurity budget planning should be part of their brand for trust and to show protection, that they are nice and tight. So customers trust you. Trust is the word here. I know all about container shipping. And I'll tell you right now, I don't care what industry it is, it's very tough to be completely prepared. I like this slide. It didn't come out too well on the print, so I could see it all. But like I said, there's a lot of cogent points here. I can send this to you. I like this slide. There's a lot of stuff here, but we're coming to the end here. Supply chain. Well, I told you, that's an hour-long talk right there, so we're not going to delve into it. One thing I found when we chose maritime to focus on in our logistics specialty is it's so close. Supply chain is in there too. It threads through everything in logistics, but especially critical for shipping. The human elements. We have found, like I said, the mistakes are still mostly human. Great tools. I give you the thing about the IDS, I didn't finish it, but so I had a lot of people years ago thought, this IDS is great. We can watch what's going on and we have all the logs, we can see traffic, we can see what's going on. We won't have to have outside people come in. Then they realized, and they're not supposed to know how to do this, a lot of them were middle IT directors, is that they didn't know how to read the logs the way a cybersecurity engineer knows how to read a log. Some of my guys, they just, and just it pops right out and down. They're already ready for it. We started out, I had a lot of ex-Pentagon top secret folks are just the best. Oops. There you go. All right. There's a compliance deadline. One-to-one, sorry about that, one-to-one individual assessment. It's important to dive into this if you folks, depending on what level that you're at, but anybody who has to be in charge of compliance. Another thing too, is that if you have a decent sized organization where your incident response team, you really should have a compliance officer there. A lot of times you're small enough where the compliance officer is also your IT director or cybersecurity director. So that takes care of that. But if you do have a compliance person, they should be on that response team and know exactly what they have to do to report to the government or whatever after something happens. Here we go. Govern. Make sure that plan's in shape. I go the wrong way. So the wrong way. Sorry, guys. So sleepy, jet lag. There we are. I like this graph. It's very to the point. These are challenges and research gaps, just kind of at a really high 25,000 foot level. Here we go. You've got CSF and maritime, respond, recover, incident response planning, recovery communication, supply chain risk, business, and then you wrap it all up. Whatever happens, business continuity plan is to dovetail right into that disaster response. Oops. Just like we said, collaborative efforts. OT and IT still are not communicating. We have too much siloing. We don't have enough segmentation in a lot of areas. But the biggest problem is even when these two entities that don't like each other, the CS and the internet folks never used to be connected. And so they don't like it. And they had a false sense of security. It wasn't so false. We're talking about SCADA systems, but it takes time out. You have one thing to do. You have to be ready for a disaster, or you have to be ready to plan what you're going to replace that system with. The good news here with these older systems is they are coming up with solutions to replace them. But once again, how long is it going to take for you folks to get trained on these systems? It has to trickle down between OT and IT and stay in constant communication. There is no such thing standalone or isolated anymore. Whether we like it or not, we're all connected with the challenges and all of the points. All right. There it all is. It's a huge topic. It was hard, but when Christy said, she goes, I said, well, let me know what you think I should talk about, and I'll be happy to do it. And I'll construct everything to fit because there's so much to talk about, and write about. And she gave me this topic, and I thought, this is a big one. What my focus on? And so the main thing is we believe that, preparedness, an ounce of prevention, as they say. There's a lot of things that are going well with the digitalization movement in the industry, but we're still getting pushback on buy-in from the top officers. Budgetary has hit everybody. People worry about the tariffs, but the goods and services, the goods still have to go, and whatever gets in the way, it's just one of those things that has to be built into your operation. Okay, so we're happy to talk to you. There's after email me after the show, but we have been in this business so long, and this type of security is not a product; it's a process. And with the planning and with the fact that the bad guys never sleep and they're getting trickier, it's getting harder to stay on top, but it can be done. So just remember, no matter how small your organization is, because we're being talked small port authorities, et cetera, there's a solution, and all of these things apply to any organization that has systems connected and they have a lot to use. If they don't, compliance is in the background, but this is the for that makes these guys happy. If you make a concerted effort, doesn't matter how small you are, you can still come out looking pretty good, especially to your precious customers and your cargo and ship owners. So I've talked long enough. I'm Carole Crawford. If there's anything else I can answer, if you go through the folder, please give us a ring. Anyway, we really hope you take those steps to secure your environment on all levels. And then there's 10 more levels that used to be 15 years ago. But if you take it piecemeal, you wind up with a plan, and eventually you'll be where you want to be. And everybody can sleep better, especially sleep. And thank you for having me. Thank you for listening.
Very good.